Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back for another video training series. This one's going to be a better understanding of the columns and information that you're able to see when you run a DEAMS General Ledger Transaction Raw New STH. So you want to make sure that you are choosing the new. There are two. When you type into search on Discover Viewr, you will find, just type in STH, you'll see DEAMS General Ledger Transaction History, and then you'll see the -new. Choose the new, gives a little bit more information, a little more columns that are needed. So once you run it and you have it exported here in Excel so it's easier to read and see, we're going to go through and kind of discuss some of these columns. So first, the amount. The amount is pretty easy. Positive is positive, negative is negative. Now, we don't need to worry about the debits and credits until a little bit later, but just understand, positive is positive, negative is negative. Next, we get into the GL account. This is called a GLAC. This is called a U.S. Standard General Ledger account, but this data is a 13 character with the dot in the middle spacing. Now, if you go out to the treasury.gov website and you look around for a listing of standard general ledger accounts, originally they were only 4 digits. It was just the 4610 here. Now they've shifted to 6 digits, or 461000 here. And now the DOD has gone and said, hey, let's add in 4 more digits after the TAC. So now we have 90000 here. But DEAMS has gone one step further and added in the last 2 digits of that GLAC. So now the DEAMS information is here. So if you were to go out online to the DQS webpage to look at data collection, and you find on the bottom the CIFIS USSGL, United States Standard General Ledger accounts for the CIFIS line, you'll see that they only go to the 4th digit after the period. DEAMS adds the 5th and 6th digits after the period. So when we're talking about GLACs, understand that anything that starts with a 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, or 8 is proprietary accounting based information. Anything that starts with a 4 or 4 series GLAC is budgetary accounting, and those are the ones we're going to be concerned with. There are some GLACs that are out there with a 9 series. Those are either rejected or pending transactions. You can run those to see what's out there, because a batch file doesn't clear if one person doesn't have money in the entire batch. So we have our GLACs here. If you look a little bit closer at the GLACs, this GL account simple description is available out there on the DEAMS SharePoint site. It shows the status of funds column, so annual obligation authority. Here's annual, here's quarterly. Here's the GL account data that's necessary for it, and then here's the GL account description with the normal balance indicators. This does not list your treasury GLACs, or what we used to know as the X in legacy, which is convenient. So this GLAC listing here will be able to have DEAMS parameters for your STH. They are all in a text file already on our SharePoint site. There's one other listing, though, that you can also find, and then this is pulled directly out of the DQS database online. So this is just the DEAMS USSGL to bid crosswalk. This is also out there on the DEAMS page. This has a few more GLACs that aren't listed on the previous document. The nice thing that I like about it is it does give you the description of the information, the entire DEAMS GL, but then it gives you the general bid that you're looking for. It talks about whether or not it's a direct or reimbursable line of accounting, whether or not it's O&M, and then if it's a normal debit or credit, and then if it's enabled. So make sure your enableds are yes, but this is all of the transactions here. So we have our mil pers, A and B, or mil con possibly. Then we have our commitments, our D for our UFCO reimbursables. Here's our paids for our bid E's. Here's our collected or filled orders but uncollected for reimbursables F. Here's our O&M targets. Here's our reimbursable target for quarterly and annual authority, our annual authority, and then here's our quarterly authority, and then here's our O for our UOO. Here's our R for collected, and then here's our U. So all of those will be shown all the way down, and it's a very nice way for you to be able to look up a GLAC and correspond it to a transition or a description or a bid information. So what you want to know is you're probably going to very soon learn that 461 is annual, 455 is quarterly, 4700 is commitment, 4801 is UOO, 4901 is AU, and 4902 is AEP. But these will help define what all of these ending digits and beginning digits are. So next we have our OE. And then we have our fund. So our fund is just our Air Force is 57. So the department, and then our appropriation is 3840. If you have a symbol, it'll be listed here, and then your fiscal year and your obligating year. For 1 year, it'll just be duplicate, and then D for direct, or R for reimbursable. Main account type, fiscal year, self-explanatory. Your BLIN is on O&M, it'll end in your SAG, so your 0117. And then for our mill purse resources, it'll end in the actual project and sub-project, 52122 there. So then you have your BA, and remember that funds control is now at the BA level, so make sure you're paying attention to your BA. Your program is your PEC, and just as in Legacy, it is the same type of PEC, except it has 0 fills at the first and third character. Your cost center is your RCCC. Your OC is what we used to call the EEC. It's now the what that you're looking for. There are several different ways to look up what your OC to EEC crosswalk is, but DQS is very, very useful in doing that as well. Here's your ESP code. Now understand that your ESP is a combination of either a contingency or an active identifier. If both of them are null, it'll show as a pound. If one of them has some information in it, it will list it here on your ESP column. So this is the one I like to look at. But here's your contingency code data, even though it has ACA as a contingency code. And then your activity identifier is just an ESP code. Applicable sales codes. So when you're adding your PTEO, the sales code ends up on the end of the BLIN, but here it will list them out separately. Work order, job order number. If you're doing CE contracts, etc., you may or may not have that, or if you're doing a contract PTEO, it may show up there. Here is your AAI, which is the ADSN now in DEAMS. Your LOB is a standard 1030. I still am trying to figure out what exactly, I think it's the line of business is called. Intercompany fund is going to be the same as your fund. Obligating year is going to be the year that you're currently in that you need to obligate it. Yeah, whether or not it's a future accounting line or a current. And then here's a combination code that's just unique. So now we have our debits and our credits. Whether or not it's a typical credit balance or debit balance will depend on how it goes positive or negative. Now we get into our reference columns. The reference columns can be different depending on the type of transaction that it is. So here I can bring up this document that you can find also out on the DEAMS SharePoint page. And it is very busy and has a lot of information, but the reference columns are busy and have a lot of information. Notice we're looking at reference 1. Well, reference 1 on a payable for a PO could be the vendor name. But reference 1 for a purchasing PO is going to be just the PO number. And then it will go across all the way down. So receivables, it'll be a posting control ID. For budgetary transactions, it will just be the transaction ID. And everything else. So pay attention that as we flow through these, you'll be able to see that there are multiple situations where reference 1 is identified as one data point, and then during a payment, it's referenced as another data point. So as we go through here, reference 2 is one that I don't use very often. It's a lot of data, but information that's not necessarily pertinent to us, as is reference 3. The main that I use are reference 1, reference 4, and reference 5. So reference 4, understand on a budgetary transaction. If we scroll down here and show you, the budgetary transaction in reference 4 is the doc number plus revision number. So this is going to be where you actually see that funding document number and your dash information. Reference 5 on a budgetary transaction is not that. However, if we show you something different, now if I scroll back to the left and show you what I'm showing you a 4700 series GLAC, which is a commitment, and I'm showing the requisition portion of the commitment. So now reference 1 is going to tell you whether or not it affects the requisition or the PO in the forms of accounting transactions until it gets to paid, and then it ships to the vendor. And now reference 4 is showing me the actual requisition number with mods, etc., that it's looking at. Now if we go back here to ref 1, and we remove the requisition and we show you a PO, now when we scroll back over to reference 4, sorry about that shaking right there, reference 4 will show us the PO that's being created from the requisition. So reference 5 now shifts to the requisition, and reference 4 becomes the PO. It is still a commitment, it is still a 4700 series GLAC. The PO is not being obligated until the Citibank payment transacts, but it is showing us that PO that is linking to that commitment on the document for a GPC. Now all I've done is taken off the commitment and I've shifted it to the UOO or the 4801 GLAC, and now you can see that we still have GPCs. Reference 4 is applying to that PO data, and now we have a reference 5 that's shifting that accounting data. So we have the 01 and then the invoice number that's assigned to it. Here is where you'll see if you do a JV or a 1081, you should see that JV 1081 number here in batch 5. Alright, so next we're looking at our 4901, the AEU GLACs, and now we're starting to shift to where certain information is coming in. So now we can see here that reference 5 is referencing the PO data that is still tracking, so we're still able to see what PO is being affected by these transactions. Here you'll be able to see that. If we scroll back to the left just a little bit, we'll be able to see reference 1 is now citing in that U.S. Bank Corp is the individual performing the action. They just have not been paid, so we've performed the pay. We just haven't collected it yet. So we're going back through to anything else, and now we're going to go back over to Ref 4 and Ref 5, where Ref 4 is going to represent that transaction ID and check ID number, so it's going over to them in that form of a check as a payable. Next we'll look at the 4902. Now that we're on our 4902, looking at that same set of data, now notice that we've lost all information associated with that PO down here for those GPCs. So we've now shifted to a total payment, so now we have our invoice number and our check transaction number, and you can see that here on the payables under payments. We'll have our vendor name, we'll have our invoice ID in reference 2, we'll have our check ID in reference 3. Reference 4 is going to be that check number and then the paid invoice number. So notice that when you're doing your STH and when you're looking through it, you can track by PO through requisition up through AEU. Once that passes through that bid, it's gone. So reference 4 and reference 5 and reference 1, they take a lot of information back and forth from each other that we have to try and take into account when we're looking through our STH and tracking information all the way through. There's a posted date. Remember, the period in DEAMS is by month or by fiscal year, end of year. If it's outside that period date, it will not work. It does close at EOM. Status is there. The batch name that it was used against, the journal name that goes along with that batch. The source, there's categories and information. And here's something nice that is with this JE header and JE line number. These are very unique data sets. If you put these two numbers together, you can use that corresponding new number when you're looking in Legacy and CRIS under the DEAMS transaction ID. This concatenated will link right over, and you can verify in CRIS, if you're still using CRIS, that your DEAMS transactions are flowing over correctly. So here you have your payments. Ref 7 is an invoice number, and then the rest are go across. So I hope this gave you some understanding and information of your STH. The new way that we look at the general ledger is DEAMS as a whole, but understand that understanding those reference columns will better allow you to track your information from beginning to end when you're doing your applicable research. Thanks for joining us, and I look forward to talking to you next time.